Alright guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I finished my Tiffany style honeycomb lamp. Took me a bit longer than what I thought, but that's because I had to learn some new techniques that I've never used before. But I think I got there in the end. I'm quite pleased with how it looks. Now before I show it you, I just want to say thanks to all you guys who've subscribed recently. Today I got subscriber number 800. I'm well pleased. Just 200 more and I'll be an official YouTuber. But that's all for the future. Let's see how I got on with my lamp. Let's get making. There's too much stuff down here. I've got to move something. For the stand, I'm going to use walnut and ash, because once they're sanded up, the white of the ash will contrast really well against the red brown of the walnut. Once I've done that, I'm going to cut a pattern into each corner using my router. And as a finishing touch, I'm going to try something a bit special, but that's going to take a little bit of working out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 3 slots into this wood, and I'm going to cut them at 45 degrees, and the depth of the slot will be just over half the thickness of the wood. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to cut 3 identical slots. Now because it's been flipped over, it'll mean that the slots on the back and the slots on the front will run at 90 degrees to each other, and because the depth of the slot is just over half the thickness, that'll leave me with 7 square holes in this wood. Now when I was drawing this, I realised that the edge of this square comes over the edge of the wood. So what I've got to do is I've got to work out the width of each slot so that the squares begin and end by touching the edges of the wood. So once I've got that worked out, I'll make myself a jig and then I'll get cutting. I've made this jig and I've put these as the beginning and the end point of each slot. So I cut once here, and then once in the middle to remove the extra material. And once I've done that, I flip it over and do exactly the same again on the other side. And there is the first hole in the centre. Now I've just got to get on and cut all the rest. Well, now that I've finished cutting the squares, I have to sand it all smooth, and then I can make some pieces of glass to fit into these holes. I I think it looks pretty smart, that. Can't wait to get that on the bottom of the lamp. Well, now all the slots are cut, I just have to cut the glass strips. And after cutting all those hexagons, this should be a piece of cake. But the first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of oil into my cutter. Not too much, because it just leaks out when I don't use the cutter. Right, let's make the strips. The cutting blade is in the centre of this piece, and this piece is 5mm, about 5mm. So it's 2.5mm. The strips are 9, so I've got this piece of wood plus this, and that'll be the right width for the strips of glass. First of all, I'll get the length. Oh, that's brilliant. Perfect. And now that I've cut the glass strip, I've put it corner to corner on one of the squares, so I know it's at 45 degrees. And I've put 2 pieces of masking tape, so I know what length to cut it. So now I just have to cut it. Just needs a little bit of grinding on this end. If I can get it out. And there we go. The first one's finished. Now I just have to cut the rest. Now that I've finished making the sides and I've fitted the glass, what I'm going to do next is the 4 corners. I'm going to make them out of these pieces of wood. All I have to do is sand them smooth, and then I'm going to put them through my router and put a 45-degree chamfer on 3 of the 4 corners. To make sure I get the chamfers starting and finishing all at the same level, I put 2 pieces of masking tape onto my table, and then I start the chamfer at the beginning of the first piece of masking tape, and the chamfer ends at the beginning of the second piece of masking tape. And that way, when I cut all 3 chamfers, they're all going to be the same length. And now that they're all done, I can cut them to length and glue it all together. Now that all the pieces are cut to length, I can start gluing them together. I noticed that when I did the chamfering on the edges, I ended up with a dark patch in the bottom corners. Now, to make sure I don't get one upside down and spoil the effect, I've put a letter B on the bottom to make sure I get that on the base. Same goes when I made these pieces. One edge is slightly longer than the other. So I've compared all 4 pieces and make sure I've got them all the right way up. Otherwise the pattern won't line up when I make the stand. To glue it together, I don't want these pieces to be flush at the front or at the back. I want it to be about halfway up. So what I've done is I've made myself 2 pieces, 2 small pieces for the width and 1 long piece, and what that'll do is it'll sit on the front, and when I put the sides on I'll have the perfect depth on both sides. I'm going to make 2 sides today, and when the glue's dried I'll do the other 2 sides tomorrow. And now I've got the piece equal distance from the surface all the way around. I'm quite pleased with that. Let's let the glue dry. Well guys, I should have had my stand finished by now, but instead I got sidetracked making this. It's a jig for something that, well, if I manage to make it, I'm sure it's going to be the only one of its kind on YouTube. It's so complicated, even the jig took me more than a week to make. And if I manage to make the piece, well, that's for another video. I'll tell you about that next time. Today is all about getting on and finishing the stand for my lamp. Now that I've finished the stand, I have to make the base, and I'm going to do that by gluing these 5 mahogany strips together and edging it with the ash. And once the glue's dry, I'll run my router around and cut a pattern into the edge. Then the only thing left to do is to make a support for the bulb and fit the glass. Now that the base is finished, I've made 4 feet, and I'm going to glue them in position and clamp them on using these plastic clamps so it doesn't damage the wood on the top. Now it's time to solder these 4 panels together, and once I've soldered them together, I've got to make a little frame that'll hold the bulb in position, and it'll allow me to sit this on top of the stand. Well guys, all I've got to do now is assemble everything and fit the bulb holder and the wire, and I'm going to use them off an old lamp that was in the house. I'm not going to try and make my own, I'll just end up burning the house down. Let's see how it turns out.